Welcome to our special edition of Borndead to Live Again. Join host Dallas Ames as we study the Word of God and learn how you can live again. And now, here's your host, Dallas Ezra Haynes.
Good evening. How are we doing this evening? It may not be evening where you're at, where this channel is. You may be in daytime. What I want to do this morning is, this evening we'll say, is share my testimony. I have shared it before, but in a long while back, about how I come into the planet and some of the things I had to go through and went through by the grace of God. I want to just kind of share that with you at this time. But anyway, we were in St. Joseph, Louisiana, where at that time when my mother was pregnant with me. My dad, he was working on the Mississippi River. They were digging the Mississippi River to bypass Lake St. John. And in them days, there was all kind of construction crews. So we were living in a tent. And I'm telling you the truth. I'm glad I was young and can't hardly remember. But that is not a nice place to live without any kind of air conditioning or whatever. But anyway, and I was, when Mother gave birth to me, I was just born. I was at the doctor's office there, just a small office. And the doctor, whenever I was born, he pulled me, come out of my mother's room, and I was dead. And that's not a good way to start your life, is it? I was born dead. I wrote a book on that if you're ever interested in reading it. And when he brought me out of, my mother's room and saw that I was not breathing, born dead, he put me over here. But he was beginning to work with my mother, who obviously was having some issues, with pain and bleeding and so forth and so on. Now, my aunt happened to be in the room with him. My aunt had went with my mother to the doctor's office, and I'm glad she was there. And all of a sudden, she looks over where I'm at, and she sees me begin to move. And then she hollered out, "Doctor, he's alive, he's alive." Thank God. I'm here, you can see me. And anyway, I was dead, literally, for somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. And then after that, I come back to life, which in itself obviously is a miracle. And the doctor, he, looked me over and this and that, and he didn't have the technology to even tell anybody, what in the world was going on. But they made an appointment with me at Ochsner's, which everybody in Louisiana pretty much knows about Ochsner's. Ochsner's in, New Orleans, Louisiana. And so we went down, they carried me down there, my aunt and my mother, and carried me to Ochsner's down there to see what the doctors could do for me. And the doctors went through, checked everything, and come back and told my mother that said he has a problem. He says, your heart has got the top two chambers, the auricles, then the bottom two chambers, which is the ventricles. And in between them is a patent ductus valve, which is actually closed while you're in your mother's womb. That way her heart and your heart wouldn't fight each other. But what they found out, he said this patent ductus valve, has not opened up. Said your son had just, the top two chambers of his heart is all he's got. And back in those days, they did not have the surgery or technology. I'm kind of telling you, a few years ago, isn't it, to do anything. So they sent me home literally, we would say to die, because there was nothing that they could do. And so that's the way my life got started. Sent me home to die. And they said that the world record, as far as they knew, was nobody, no child had ever lived beyond 4 years old. And they were just telling Mother the facts, or as they knew them, so they didn't give her any hope. And fortunately, I was so young. I mean, I was just born, so I obviously didn't know anything about it either. But so she would come back to the tent. My aunt went on to her home, and back to the tent that we were staying in. Like I said, my dad was working right there, and so Mother and Dad and me were all in one tent. There's a bunch of tents back in them days. You were traveling. You were renewing the Mississippi River. Your job was just, I mean, sun up, sun down. So I was probably, I'm going to say, around 6 months old, and I'll never forget Mother talking to me. She said, "Son," said, "of course, you know, your situation, we didn't know when, you know, you might go on, you know, pass away or whatever." He said, but, and so she's kind of learned to live with that. But one day, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a black woman shows up at the front of our tent. And there was very few blacks in those days in the construction and the rerouting of the Mississippi River. You know, just very, very few. And she come up to the door, and I mean, you know, you got your little flapper, and she kind of bumped on it. And Mother said, "You know, I didn't know whether to open the thing or not." So, you know, because there was so much going on in these levee camps, you know, they get pretty interesting. But she says, I went and opened it up. I was kind of impressed the Lord opened it up, so I opened it up. And she came in, and she looked at me, and she said, "Miss Haynes," and she said, Mother said, that staggered me right there. How in the world did this woman know my name? "Miss Haynes, may I pray for the child?" And that's what she wanted to do, pray for the child. Now this woman was not from this planet. I can assure you of that. And Mother said she you know, took me, and like I said, I was probably about 6 or 7 months, about 6 months old. And just like if y'all saw the Lion King, the Disney movie, when they lifted the baby up in the air. Anyway, she took me and absolutely lifted me up in the air, just like this. And she began to pray. And Mother said she was praying in a language that I'd never heard before, which obviously today we know that it would be tongues. So she was speaking in tongues, and Mother didn't really know what she was saying. And of course, that's another gift. Then she handed me back to Mother. And so the lady just left, never to be seen again. And this got Mother's curiosity up, so she started talking, you know, to people in the levee camp about had they ever seen this woman before. And they said, "No, we never have. You know, we never have." And so really what you see is that angels coming in and praying, because I wasn't supposed to live You know, the longest lifespan in the world was going to be four years. And she come and prayed for me, and went out the door and never to be seen again. And so that is a miracle in itself. So after that we went home. You know, mother had already been down to like I said, the hospital in New Orleans, checked it out. So after this woman prayed for me, mother said, "Son, you begin to kind of get more energy, and it looks like you was going to, you know, survive or whatever." But anyway, I, you know, kept kept on keeping on. We finally left, you know, that part of the world, and come back to Kilburn, Louisiana, you know, where I had actually grew up, you know, where we actually grew up as kids. And so brought me back, you know, to Kilburn, and we were up there. And boy, I'm telling you, you know, it was still some interesting times ahead of me. What happened at about, when I got to be about, you know, I was supposed to die at 4. And what is amazing to this, what I want you to do is not to see Dallas Haynes in this. I want you to see Jesus Christ in this. And if he can do it for me, he can do it for you. So that's what I want you to see Jesus Christ in this testimony. And like I said, if he can do it for me, he can do it for you. And so we like I said, we had come back and to our old home place. And what's amazing on top of all that, for the first 5 years of my life, I had pneumonia every year. And pneumonia in those days was killing people. I mean, you know, back in the 50s, 60s, I mean, well, 50s, 40s, 50s. I mean, there were a lot of people dying from just pneumonia. And I had it 5 times. Every year I had pneumonia. I still had this heart defect, but yet I lived through all of that. And that, again, is a miracle. Now, I'm not trying to bring attention to me, but what I'm bringing attention to is that a black woman who came out of heaven, literally, and came down and prayed for me, I'm still alive. And it's like everything the enemy could throw, he was throwing at me. And I went through, you know, living with a heart that with a patent ductus valve and all this, and then had pneumonia 5 times, you know, and first 5 years of my life, and lived through that. It's been an interesting travel, to say the least. And like I said, we moved back home, which is, you know, Kilburn, Louisiana, over there right north of Oak Grove, little town, little bitty place now. And that area there, and that's where we were living. And about 1958, my mother would have cancer. And that was rare back in those days. So you could see the enemy just didn't like us at all. So Mother had to go to Little Rock, Arkansas, and that was about, like I said, 1958. And then as she was going through the cancer treatment, which was successful, she found out that there was a heart doctor there who was an Oriental or Japanese guy, Dr. O'Hara, who was one of the best heart surgeons in the country at that time. Of course, we didn't know anything about it. But anyway, it was put together that he would look at me and see if he thought he could do anything with it. And Dr. O'Hara, he he did the surgery and went in, and like I said, your heart has got two auricles, top chambers, two ventricles, bottom chambers, and then a patent ductus valve in the middle. It keeps everything shut off, and once you come out of your mother's womb, then the patent ductus valve is designed by God to open up. My patent ductus valve did not open up. So he went in and took the patent ductus valve out and changed everything, and I now had my life back. Now I was doing, okay, but my growing, I was almost like a midget. But whenever he cut that out and my heart opened up and everything started functioning, then I went on with my life, and that was another miracle right there. But what I'm getting to you and using my testimony as an example, if Jesus Christ can do this for Dallas Haynes, he can do this for anybody, any Christian, anybody. He can do these kind of healings or whatever the situation may be. And like I said, when that black woman come and lifted me up before the Lord and prayed for me in unknown tongues, then absolutely the power of God come in. And even though I would be on some tough roads along the way, don't get me wrong, I still had this Damocles over my head as you're going to die, you're going to die. I can guarantee that the demons of hell want to tell you that every morning. And but I went out and I was 12 years old when I had the heart surgery, and it was successful. And then after that, I began to grow and go on with my life, and 12 years old, and anyway, get back home again and everything put together, and thank God for that. But my dad, he was a construction worker. He was gone most of the time, but anyway, he told me that I'm 13 now. I want you to start clearing the land, down there, our land. And he got me a chainsaw. Now I'm not as big as the chainsaw, probably. The chainsaw was a David Bradley back in those days, to cut down some trees and make sure everything's okay, and da. And so I was up there, went in there that first morning and was cutting trees. I cut down the first one, and it fell into a tree beside it. So it didn't hit the ground. It just rotated from the stump and fell into a tree beside it. And you wouldn't dare touch that tree there, because if you went and tried to cut the other one, both of them fall on it. So I went off over here to another tree and cut it down, which was a good ways from where the other two were. And when it hit the ground, that tree that I cut was jarred and shook, and then it turned loose and fell on top of me. And so here I am, down in the Beth River swamps by myself, 12, 13 years old, with a tree on top of me. And the chainsaw that I had, it was David Bradley, but when it knocked me down, the chainsaw was right there around my kneecap, and it began to grind on my kneecap and cut it open. But here's what's another miracle. A boy who was about 2 miles from us, he lived about 2 miles from us, the Morgan boy. And he said, he come up there and he said, I couldn't believe he showed up about the same time the tree fell on top of me. So he come around here and pulled the chainsaw, off from me, and pulled me out from, the tree. And I said, boy, am I glad to see you. And here's my point, another miracle. Now, I'm going through a bunch of stuff, but here's the good news. God is going with me. Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit are going with you. They were with me, they were with you. And as a Christian, you know, we need to remember that. We need to remember that. You may be going through some hellish times, but remember, God is still the King of the universe. And so prayer and praying is your force, and you need to do that. That, and of course, become a Christian. So now I have survived being born dead. I've survived the heart situation. And now I have survived a tree that's fell on, the tree fell on me and then cut into my kneecap, and I went to the doctor for that, and he sewed it up, and it's been normal. Surprisingly normal all these years. And by then, you know, it's it gets interesting. It gets interesting, you know, to see. Now we, like I said, we hung around there a long time, and of course we got back home. And Mother had been saved, and then, you know, we got our life together, and everything was going good. Now we moved to Mobile, Alabama. And boy, I'm telling you the truth, I had an interesting experience there also. And while we was in Mobile, this guy was going to church. And I went by myself that night because my wife and my son he had so much going on, she couldn't, you know, with the school and so forth, she couldn't go. So she had to stay home. So I went on to church, you know, by myself. I was going to a pretty good sized church there in Mobile, Alabama. And so after the services, I started back, you know, to go to the apartment that we were living in. And you had to cross the boulevard there, which was today it's I-10. So this particular boulevard was 4-lane. Of course, it had lights on it there at that where I was at. So I came up there to it. I'm driving a Chevy Love. Now that's a big truck, isn't it? A Chevy Love. And then all of us, you know, I come to this light. The light turns green. I start across, you know, Government, what they call it, Government Boulevard. And I got about halfway across it, and a woman that come over this hill, you couldn't see her. You had the green light. You didn't see any concern for nothing. But she was in a stolen car and running from the police. She hits my little Chevy Love, drives me completely across out of those 2 lanes into the other side. I mean, I was hit. And what's interesting is the fact that I mean, you know, and the police come up there and so forth and so on, and boy, I mean, I had been beat up. And as it turned out, I asked him, you know, I was still able to talk and move around. You know, I said, what happened? He said, about the woman that stole the car, and said, Mr. Haynes, she was doing 100 miles an hour. And she threw on her brakes, and we went out there to check. She probably was doing around 70 miles an hour when she hit you. But she's driving a big Grand Prix, so she could go on down the road even after she hit me. And there I was in my little Chevy Love. And they asked me, what can we do? I said, you need to get home, and you need to go to the hospital, and so forth and so on, which obviously makes a whole lot of sense. And so I went home, you know, to our apartment. But by the grace of God, I could drive my own self in the Chevy Love, even though it was beat up and knocked 60 feet or so across into the other side of the Government Boulevard. I was able to drive it back to the apartment. Now, when I got there, my wife I mean, she was out of, we went out of control here. And she said, we got to go to the hospital. We got to go to the hospital. And I said, I agree with you. I agree with you. Because I'm telling you, that pain, when that truck, Grand Prix hit me, it drove me into the door. And so I'd caved in the door with this side of me, and the ribs on that thing, I didn't even know if I even had ribs anymore. And so I said, yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. So we got together, and we, got a sitter for my son while we were going to the hospital. And we started out to the hospital. And all of a sudden, I could hear the Lord's voice. And he said, son, if you will go to the hospital, that's your choice. And that's fine. Or you can go back to the apartment and I will heal you. And I'm going to tell you, when you looked at me and how beat up I was, and these rib cages were, it began to break loose right in there some. And were coming around in the stomach area. But I heard it, and I believed it was God. And so I told my wife, and she said, Dallas, and she was kind of upset, my goodness gracious, are we sure? And anyway, so we went back to the apartment, and we went to bed, and I'm telling you the truth, was I ever having pain? Pain is not even the word for it, to tell you the truth. And so it got to be, all that happened around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and we went back to the house and got in bed and began to try to rest, and finally went to sleep. And then about 1 o'clock a.m., I'm awakened. And when I did, I heard two angels talking. And one of them said, he's waking up. Are you through? And the other angel said, yes, I am. And so I felt a set of ribs just coming out like this, where they should be. And then he turned, I opened my eyes. I was scared to open my eyes, to tell you the truth. But then I opened my eyes whenever they turned and started walking out, and it was two angels from God that come down to heal me and fix me, and I've never had a problem with anything like that since then. They were about 7 foot tall. I'm not going to say they're all that way, but they were walking down the apartment, and I did get a chance to wake up and glance at their backside. And I just want to know you, God has given you every bit of what I have seen is available to you. So don't ever quit the faith. Don't ever quit your destiny. Run out of time. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for watching our special edition of Born Dead to Live Again. We trust this message has blessed you. Join us next time for Born Dead to Live Again.